So this is actually my very first Master Gardener presentation. All right, so thank you for my maiden voyage, all of you here. I get to be part of this. It is incredibly humbling coming after such seasoned Master Gardeners who had just continue to invoke so much wisdom, and I am just so grateful to be part of this program as a volunteer and having an interest in plants and gardening. And what's wonderful about Lake County Master Gardener volunteers is that you don't have to be an expert in all things horticulture, right? I've only been on the planet a few decades, and there's a whole lot to learn, and everybody brings their own story and unique interests to the table, which is what makes it just a fantastic group of blended individuals that, some are interested in horticulture, some are interested in insects, etc. So anyway, my name is Brittany. I've been with the Master Gardeners, like Susan said, since the spring of 2022, and let's get into this. For the title, Shade Pollinator Gardens. I'm sure when you type into Google, what plants can I grow in the shade, right? It's going to give you the same kind of recycled lists of sorts, maybe a lot of leafy things, right? We know when we think shade, maybe we think ferns, or we think, Miss Carol back there gave a presentation a couple weeks ago over at the Lake Branch, where, she just had such an incredible amount of foliage that was, unique to some and things like that. But I wanted to focus more on the pollinator aspect, right? Those sorts of things may bring some shelter and habitat, but they don't always necessarily bring the pollen or the nectar producing plants that we're desperate for, especially if our properties have a lot of shade, right? So in order to talk about that, we're going to talk about that first word, right? In order to understand what plants can I put in my yard or my space, we need to understand our lighting conditions. What plants are appropriate for your space? It is incredibly advantageous to study your space, whether it's a yard, a patio, or a balcony. You may have grand dreams of a designer raised garden with tomatoes galore, or maybe you dream of a luscious fern garden. But if your space does not receive at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight per day, your tomatoes are not going to thrive. If you have nothing but full sun, it will not offer the needed protection for your ferns to thrive. If you haven't already, take a few days to intentionally scope out the areas of your yard or your growing spaces. Take note of where the sun is at the beginning of the day, and record the amount of time the sun stays in each area every couple of hours or so. And then also keep in mind that as the seasons change, these figures will change too, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later. So last year, my family was very blessed to move into our first home. I was delighted to see such a large variety of mature trees. On the perimeter of our property, I always tell people it's like they hug our property like a big bear hug. However, with trees comes a little bit of challenge, because I quickly realized that my house's yard, where a garden could potentially be planted, and the expansive fruit and vegetable gardens that I had envisioned initially, they had there was a lot of shade being cast in those areas where I initially dreamed about those things. And I thought, well, okay, we need to figure out and go back to the drawing table here. So I actually got to work last year going over my property and sun mapping a little bit, right? From the front of my house, and checking out and seeing, okay, where's the sun casting over? It was mostly summertime by that point, because we'd moved in the early June or mid-June or so. And so, it was full on summertime. I'm looking around, the different areas of our household and such, and just trying to get an idea of where is my actual sun and how long is it there. So the previous homeowner that we had was an avid gardener. See, her passion seemed to be woody ornamentals, which that is wonderful. I'm not a huge proponent of those, like Susan had shared. I'm more interested in the vegetable and the fruit gardening, but anything to get more pollinators onto my property would be great, right? Because you need pollination to happen for your fruits and your vegetables. So I know she must have been very attentive to the needs of her plants that she had there. So I was taking note of what already was growing there as well and thriving in the present conditions. So let's talk about types of light. If you look on Google, or if you're doing some research, there's a wide expanse of types of light available to you. We're going to stick with a few just general terms here. So when we talk about the lighting, just so we're generally on the same page, the full sun is going to be 6 to 8 plus hours of direct sunlight per day. Very important, this does not need to be continuous, right? If you're going to get some in the morning, 3 or 4 hours in the morning, but then that doesn't circle back around until a little bit later in the afternoon, that is still adding up to your sun hours. But we're talking about direct full sun Partial sun is going to be more in the 3 to 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. And I'm going to put this here, I said more sun, not less, right? Because why do we have 3 to 6 hours again, right? This, for partial shade, it also says 3 to 6 hours of direct sun per day. However, on the first slide that I just showed, these are the plants that need a little bit hotter sun, maybe in that, like they could take some more afternoon sun. More sun, less shade. This partial shade is going to be more shade, not too much direct sun, okay? So these are the ones that are not going to benefit as greatly if they're getting that really, really hot direct afternoon sun, maybe some of your ferns or things like that. Those are going to need less, right? We're going to need a little bit of less on the sunlight, but still around that 3 to 6 hour mark. And then full shade, we're going to be talking about less than 3 hours of direct sunlight per day. Keep in mind, all plants do need some kind of light, right? So we can't have a whole lot of things growing in total darkness, right? So I'm guessing that quite a lot of you are dealing with some sort of partial or full shade light conditions since you're at this presentation. Just so I can kind of get an idea, can I get a little nod or a hand that's like, yeah, I've got some shade things at my house? Yeah, some nods, some hands? Okay, cool. All right, now that we've defined our lighting conditions and called out the shade in the room, let's set this part of the shelf for a little bit, and we're going to talk about the second part of our presentation title, pollinators. Okay, so we've talked about our lighting conditions, what is light, defining shade pieces here, and let's talk about pollination. You might be thinking, all right, pollinators, bees and butterflies, here we go. We hear that word a lot in the garden, horticultural, and conservation world, but I think it is important to broaden our understanding of what kind of pollinators, besides the obvious and wonderful bees and butterflies, may be searching near and far in your growing area for something to pollinate right here in Ohio. But of course, let's start with the bees, because they're great, right? So besides those listed here, we've got our honeybee, we've got a leaf-cutting bee, bumblebee. There's going to be tons more that you find, right? So in Ohio alone, there's about 500 different bee species. So we've got the sweat bees, we've got the carpenter bees, we've got squash bees, etc. There's a lot of bees flying around our area, right? Just right here in Ohio. So we've got our bees. We've got butterflies and moths. There's going to be lots of varieties. I did not go into each of the pollinators could have their own presentation, so I am just kind of touching on this, right? Plenty of butterflies and moths that make their way into our yards. So both daytime and nighttime possibilities there, right? Dr. Ann Shannon gave a presentation recently on gardening for the evening and was talking about some of those flowers that may attract moths as well. All right, and we have wasps, the pesky things that most people are running like crazy from, right? These guys might get a bad reputation, but they are part of the good bugs club sometimes. They don't spread as much pollen due to having more of a smoother body, right? They're not attracting as much of the pollen, but they are great hunters for bugs we don't want around as well. And they do, occasionally they will, you can see here on like some of their legs and stuff like that, it will get some of the pollen on there too. So just a little bit, but they're part of the good club too. Flies as well. Most people don't think about the flies as being good pollinators, but they are part of the club. Beetles. So I thought this was interesting when I was doing my research that I came across a quote that said, beetles are the most diverse group of organisms in the world. Fossil records suggest that beetles, along with flies, were probably the first insect pollinators of prehistoric flowering plants in the late Jurassic era. So one of my favorite fruits, actually, of Northeast Ohio, or of Ohio region, just touching on the beetles for a second, right? How many of you here have heard of pawpaws or have eaten a pawpaw, okay? Native tree, all right, to this region, fantastic fruit. I can't get enough of them, right? I love them. October, look for in October if you haven't ever gotten a chance to taste them. But pawpaw trees are pollinated mostly by flies and beetles, right? Even the way that the flower is constructed in its nature, it's more conducive for a beetle pollinating it than anything else. So it does a little bit better with the more. I read an article once that said people put out rotting meat in their pawpaw orchards to attract more flies. I don't think I'm going to be joining that little club here in my yard, but it was very interesting. I thought, wow, no beetles, no pawpaws. So anyway, that's one of the ones I love. And of course, hummingbirds, right? The ruby-throated hummingbird is one of the most common species that we'll see here in Ohio. You might also see the rufous hummingbird, and other types, they're less common or rare, but you will see a variety of them. But definitely that ruby-throated one would be one that you'll see more than often. So, all right, so we've talked about light. We've talked about pollinators, all right? So let's get in the dirt, right? I have not met a seasoned gardener yet who does not use the phrase right plant, right place, right? Because you have to know what we've already talked about, right? You have to know your light conditions. You have to know also soil. We didn't talk about soil all that much, but you have to know your soil conditions as well, right? You can go into any nursery you want and see the most beautiful plant and think, oh, I'm going to have that. I'm going to buy it. Just because you do does not mean it's going to thrive at your house, though, unfortunately. So to make sure that you're not choosing plants that are wasting your money, right, your time or your resources, just trying to grow a plant in a location that it simply will not survive or thrive in. And plus, it's very draining emotionally. I don't know if any of you feel that way about your plants, but just, when you can't seem to get that one plant to grow right, and it's just like, what am I doing wrong here? Kind of works a little bit on the nerves. So choosing a reputable producer as well. I will say I chose a variety of plants to highlight in this presentation that some may have heard. Obviously, if you are a seasoned gardener, you may have heard of all of these. If you're not, hopefully I can surprise you with some of them that I had found in my research. The important part is that you have to source well, right? So just no disrespect to buying some plants off the shop, off the shelf at Home Depot or something like that. Some of these guys, especially the natives, probably Home Depot might not be your best option. All right. So just knowing where to find the best producers in this area, and thankfully, Lake County, as one of the former nursery capitals of the world here, we do have a lot of options to choose from. Also, when buying your plants, checking on the tags to find out what lighting conditions that plant needs to thrive in your space. Observe what's going on at the nursery before buying. So if you are checking some things out and you notice a lot of bees already hovering over a particular plant, that might be a great one to bring home, right? Because you're already watching what they're doing in their environment there. So we're going to talk about some native versus non-native plants. I'm not a native plant purist, right? I have plenty of things in my yard, especially because I have an inherited garden, that are not native, right? However, there are reasons why master gardeners and professionals in the horticultural and conservation communities highly encourage planting native species. Chiefly, they are much more adapted to thriving in their native regions, which means less struggle in the growing process. They're also frequently better at attracting native pollinators and providing them with the necessary food they need. However, please do be sure to never remove a native plant from their native habitat, right? So you're not going to go out in the woods and see a set of flowers and go, oh, let me dig that up, and go take it back home. Don't do that. So as far as the non-native goes, so my house, again, inherited garden, right? In this spring was the first spring that I got to see what was going on in our garden, right? Because we bought the house in May last year, and so I've never seen my house waking up to spring. And this lady before me planted just an expansive amount of daffodil bulbs, right? I mean, I have hundreds. I have varieties I've never seen before that, I'm looking in my yard going, it was like a treasure hunt every single week. There was something new, coming up, and it was like, wow, this lady knew. She must have been in those seed catalogs all the time. Oh, I'll take this bulb and this one. She's having all the different varieties. So I have a dazzling display of daffodils in the spring. But unfortunately, even after observing these for, the weeks that they were in bloom, they don't offer much in the way of pollination, right? So much has taken place, so many different varieties have been developed and alterations to its natural form that not very frequently will you see pollinators go to daffodils, right? Maybe if they are absolutely desperate or something and they're trying, but they left them all alone. So I only say that because the daffodils aren't native here. It offers almost nothing in the way of pollination, right? So that's where sometimes give and take to native versus non-native. However, the deer do not bother them. So if you do want some color at least, daffodils are not a terrible thing, but they are mostly for looks, right? Also, it is important to note the colors and structures of the plants that you're going to buy when you're at the nursery trying to figure out, do I go native, do I not, what kind of shade, what kind of light am I looking at, are there pollinators involved, but also taking a look at what kinds of colors they are and also what is their structure. So apparently bees cannot see the color red, so they are more attracted to purple, violets, and blues. Butterflies are going to be attracted to bright colors such as orange, red, yellow, pinks, and purples. And then those hummingbirds are especially attracted to red and pink flowers. And you have to keep in mind too that within the structure of the flower that you're choosing, some insects have long mouthpieces and some have short, right? So bees and flies are going to have the shorter mouthpieces. They need more shallow flowers to drink the nectar from. Pollinators that don't hover to feed on need a sturdy landing pad, right? So they're going to need somewhere to land on these flowers in order to feed. And then pollinators who feed with long tongues, such as hummingbirds or butterflies, that sort of thing, they're going to prefer those longer tubular flowers that collect more nectar deep inside the flower. So just being aware of shapes and sizes and colors and what kinds of things, right? Something that I found extremely helpful with Dr. Shannon, actually, our A&R educator, what she did, what I've seen her do with her presentations is, we like to talk about pollinators. We don't want all of our pollinators to be concentrated in one part of the season, right? When we're feeding and we're being attentive to these things, we want to talk about the entire growing season. And so what I have tried to do in this presentation is I'm going to give you something for the entire season, right? So something that's going to be late winter, early spring. We've got springtime, summer, late fall. So that way you can plan with the whole season in mind. We only get so many months here in Northeast Ohio, so we got to take as much as we can and be, do the best we can with them. So I'm going to run through a plethora here of flowers and different things. The QR code that may or may not be on the sheet, that just because of the issues we have with the filing, I'm going to have that at the end of this presentation as well. Found this amazing resource through OSU that was done by two authors. They compiled this incredible list of natives, specifically natives to Northeast Ohio. They had their specific growing conditions, they had their light preferences, what pollinators they attracted in observation mode, things like that. So I will have that for you guys. You can take, if it's not on the paper, you can use your phone and use the QR code at the end. But I pulled a lot of the native information from that page. Just an incredible resource, okay? So roll with me for a little bit here. We're gonna talk through some of these things. So let's talk about late winter, early spring. I don't know about you guys, but the very first little pops of anything coming out of the ground after a long winter just bring me so much joy, right? You see that the greens start to come through the snow and it's like, oh yes, God, okay, like this is great, finally something to show that there's a sign of spring, that winter is going to be coming down. And I saw this one right here. This is a yellow trout lily. I am not going to pronounce the Latin stuff, all right? That's on my to-do list, but I am not a Latin expert here, so I'm gonna just skip that little part there. But this is a native. This blooms around March through May. So you're gonna see some of those, the stemage starting to come through there. But look at these anthers here. I mean, just like, it's just like something to hold on to. They're great. You're gonna find a lot of these more in a wooded area. They like moist, wooded, like kind of dappled shade sort of areas. And these are going to attract your long-tongued bees. So just a great little pop of sunshine out coming in the very beginning of March there. Something else here are the common snowdrops. So this was actually my yard right here. Anything with my name on it there, that actually comes from my yard. Again, just really wonderful coming through some of that dead, the dead foliage on the ground and just seeing those, and they're starting to come out. This is going to bloom in late February, early March. It likes the sun, but it can tolerate part shade. So again, thinking through some of those times whenever we said, well, I've got shade at my house. Well, what season is it, right? Because the same parts of my house that right now are going to have shade in the springtime, late winter, early spring, the leaves on the trees that shade out those parts in the summer are not there in the early spring, right? So it's something to think about. Like, you really have to know the mapping of your property to say, oh, that's right, okay. I'm not having this giant canopy like that in the late winter. It's all just the sticks, the bark of the tree, the trunk of the tree. It may offer some more options for you where you thought, oh, I only have shade, but you might have a little bit more than that in the very early spring. This one it produces nectar and some are fragrant, which is going to be very attractive to pollinators here. And just, I love this kind of variegated inner part here too of the flower. It just offers some unique color perspective. All right, this is called Spring Beauty. I just love the little hints of pinks and purple in there. This is a native as well. I could probably pronounce this one, the Claytonia virginica. Okay, look at that. Blooms March through May. This is also likes a lot of wooded areas, moist clearings, and it's going to attract a variety of bees, flies, and butterflies. So this is a great pollinator for the early needs of beneficial insects. It can be used as more of an informal ground cover too, and around like boulder plants that may be coming up. So a little bit more on the dainty side, but still offers kind of more that shallow flower that we can get some of those more short-tongued insects to enjoy there. All right, the hellebore, I love these. I don't know if any of you have these at your house. Again, I was very blessed and grateful for the lady who owned my house before. I'm probably gonna say that a few more times. I wish I never even got to meet her, friends, okay? Like I never even got to meet this lady to tell her how amazing she is. But these were in my yard. I have ones that are a little bit of the darker pink, light purple variety, as well as this, white and kind of purpley sort of thing. This is actually a non-native, but it has not been proven to cause any issues with, we oftentimes non-natives get a bad reputation whenever they push out native plants, if they overshadow the native plants and kind of, kill them out a bit, that's when we're going to have some issues with, a non-native is not good, right? So non-natives sometimes will just do their own thing, right? And not interfere with the native things going on, which is what hellebores end up doing. They're very nice. Their foliage is also, it offers more things, to catch the eye aesthetically too. And they just last a long time, very late into the spring. And I realized this year too, a lot of abnormal growing conditions for us here in Northeast Ohio this year because of the way the weather was. But hellebores have both pollen and nectar to produce a great stop for bees. I did read though too, try to use the single flower, and this is kind of across the board, not just for hellebores. Try to choose the single flower over the ones that have the double and triple blooms in the flowers, right? Because those doubles and triples take away from the pollen producing capabilities and the nectar producing capabilities of that plant. So as much as, if you're just going for aesthetics, sure, add some, I've seen some of those, they're like triple crown lilies and things like that. Those look amazing. In the way of pollination though, probably not your best choice. And the same thing with hellebores. There are some double varieties, but it takes out, that second bloom takes out so much of the ability to hold more pollen and nectar that it doesn't become as effective for the pollinators. This likes light shade areas, and I would say light to mid, because I have some underneath like an American cranberry tree that, it's pretty shady under there. And it's got a thick root system that will deter vole tunneling if you have any issues with voles on your property. And it's generally deer and rabbit resistant. I will show you guys later, the deer love my house. Okay, so anything that I see that will bloom and blossom and stay and not be eaten by mom and the babies, it's a good plant for me. It is great. All right, so again, March to late spring for hellebores. All right, and this is the snow trillium. It's another beautiful pop of white color there. This is a native. This blooms in April or March through April. Again, more of a moist wooded area and shade. Also enjoys cliffs, more of an alkaline soil. This one's known to attract many types of bees, flies, and butterflies. Winter aconite. This is a non-native. This one grows at my house, rent-free. And it's also one of those ones that not sure if it will grow or not in shaded areas or whatnot, but this one can tolerate partial shade. It likes moist, well-drained areas. Blooms around the March time, just a wonderful little surprise pop of color when you're getting out of the car and all of a sudden you look over next to the snowdrops and there are these beautiful little yellow flowers popping through. Does attract bees. You can see this is one I took just going to town on that flower. Also deer resistant. They don't seem to bother them, which is really nice. All right, this is the sharp-lobed hepatica. Okay, this is a native, blooms March through May. You can grow this in part shade or shade. Deeper shade it'll handle that, deciduous or mixed woods. This is about a 2 to 6 inch flower coming up here on this stem. Just such a nice, dainty little purplish flower. And check out these leaves. This foliage is just fantastic with it. I love it. I think it offers the best of everything. It has no nectar, but it does attract the bees, the honey, small carpenter, and others, as well as flies. So just a pollen, not a nectar and pollen combination there, but just so precious. I love it. All right, so we're gonna be jumping into more of the full spring flowers right here. This one is the Jack in the Pulpit. Sometimes, do you ever look at your flowers or things that you find around nature and things like that and think, how in the world did that get to that, right? How do we have that plant growing? Like that, this grows on our planet, right? This one is a native, so it actually grows right here, which is just crazy. So Jack in the Pulpit blooms April through June, likes moist to wet soils and shady, seasonally wet locations. It also produces berries that are eaten by birds and mammals, not safe for humans, okay? Also deer resistant, pest free, and this one's going to attract more fungal gnats, all right? So a little bit of the odd attractor, but such a unique plant. I couldn't not add this because even if you're just attracting something as seemingly significant as gnats, right? Something's got to eat those gnats, and oftentimes it's other larger bugs, things like that, maybe birds. They're going to be doing some action around there, and just this berry combination too adds another pop of color to your garden area, right? Especially those areas where you're not going to have the most prolific, gorgeous flowers all the time with the bright sunshine sort of thing, but it adds some more color to your space there. And this is going to bloom, like I said, April through June, so you get some good color there. This one is the cut-leaved toothwort. This is a native as well, blooms April through May. They're just pretty. I just love how these ones, they kind of cascades down as they're starting to bloom. This likes wooded areas with shade, rich soil. It attracts several types of bees chiefly, but also early spring butterflies and the giant bee fly. All right, so this one, we're looking at golden ragwort. This is a native as well, blooms April through July. And this likes moist soil, part shade to full sun. All right, so again, just keeping in mind where your areas are in your house. And it attracts small bees and flies. And you can see actually at the top there's a fly right there at the top of that one. So yeah, don't knock the flies, right? They still have work to do too. All right, this is Jacob's ladder. Almost kind of reminds me of the hellebore, just a little bit in the way that it's shaped here. So this is also a native. I was heavy with the natives in this one, right? Because again, you don't want to go against the grain too much and work too hard to grow what can already thrive in our area, right? Go with the current of growing stuff rather than against it, and still come up with things that are beautiful, right? This likes moist wooded areas, part shade to full shade, right? So going to be one of your better ones as far as, wondering where that line is between shade and not. This attracts bees like honey, bumble, little carpenter, and mason bees, while also attracting the giant bee fly, butterflies, and moths. So this is a good one for moths too. Just very pretty in the varieties that it offers, those purples and lights. And this one, I was so excited about this one. This is Trillium. This is a native. I've actually never seen this flower before, okay? I don't know if any of you have. I've never seen it before doing my research. And when I came across this deep red color and saw it was a native, it likes partial sun to shade. I mean, it's very adaptive in its light conditions. It blooms April through May. I was so excited about it because it just was beautiful. This pop of color that was so pretty. I will say though, apparently it has a very grotesque smell, which attracts flies and beetles. So apparently this is the one I have to plant near my pawpaw trees whenever I get those installed in my house, okay? So we'll just leave the rotting meat alone and we'll bring in the Trillium, and that can just be underneath my pawpaw trees, okay? But just gorgeous color there, love it. Eastern red columbine. This is another it's great. I love it. It's just so beautiful. Lots of color, variety of color there, the yellows and the pinks and deep reds. This is a native as well, blooms April to July, will tolerate part shade to shade, attracts bumblebees and ruby-throated hummingbirds. Blue cohosh, this is also a native. Blooms April through May. It likes rich, moist woodlands, part shade to full shade. I really liked it whenever I saw part shade to full shade, right? Because we have a lot of, there are some folks that have some really deep shade, and I just want to tell you, all hope is not lost, right? There are things that will grow there. It attracts several bees, flies, and wasps. And just again, with the kind of more berry aesthetic as well, to add some more pops of color. Some of these I think fly under the radar because their colors, especially in the springtime, maybe, shaded out by the new foliage coming on the trees and things like that as the woods. Sometimes I think you miss some of these ones just because they're not the bright prolific flower like I'm about to show you here. So moving into summer, the Michigan lily, obviously you're not going to miss this one. It's got lots of good colors to it. This is a native. Blooms June to July, likes moist, cool conditions in sun, part shade, and shade. This is going to attract hummingbirds, moths, and butterflies. And who cannot get over just this exquisite design here on the lily? It's just absolutely beautiful. And again, the fact that it is native. Oh yes, it grows here. All right. This is a non-native false goat's beard, a stilby. Blooms June through September. I could not get over just how beautiful, just the wispiness of this, the different varieties that are available here. This likes partial to full shade. It can tolerate some sun in moist soil. It can grow well in containers. So something that Susan had shared, I realize I am so grateful and blessed to be a homeowner, right? My husband and I, we prayed for that for a long time, right? And so, but I realized though, folks like my mother-in-law, for example, she's lived in an apartment for the last 40 years, right? She's an apartment dweller, and that is awesome, right? She does not have, I don't even know if she has a balcony, but I realize that there are some folks that they've only got a balcony, or they've only got a patio to work with, or something like that. Maybe they just have a small window box that's what they're working with, right? But they still want to have something going on, or they at least have a space where they can put some potted things or whatnot. And I think that is important, right? Because in this day and age too, with social media, the big, the raised bed gardens and things like that are becoming very on trend these days. And it's like, oh, if you're gonna garden, you got to get the raised bed stuff with, the big fence that goes around and stuff. There's a lot of beauty to that, no question, right? But what does it look like for just the average gardener? The person who's saying, I just want some color. I just want to put my hands in a little bit of dirt. I've got a little bit of space to work with. How can I do that, right? So this one I was very encouraged to see, hey, it can also grow very well in containers. So if you do have a shaded patio, hey, put some astilbe in there, right? That might be a good one. And it also will contain it as well as it grows. Lots of variety of colors, highly attractive to bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. So this is a great one, whether you have a yard or whether you have a patio, this is a good one for you. All right, Indian hemp. This is a native as well, blooms June to September. This is going to like moist soil and part shade, attracts several bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, and beetles, so kind of an all-around pollinator here. Both the flower and the stem provide color for your garden space here, so I don't know if you can tell, but so we've got a little bit of the white floral stuff, but these stems are like a deep reddish purple, so adding a little bit more color in the way of just more so even just the flower, but also the stem and the foliage, just adding some really nice pops, and again, all-around kind of thing. So this next one, I'm laughing a little bit to myself here because I know at least a couple of master gardeners in the room who've heard me go on about my prolific Rose of Sharon, all right? And this is probably the only hedge/tree, okay, I've included in this, but I could not help myself, okay? So Rose of Sharon, okay, is a hibiscus variety, non-native, okay? It blooms midsummer to fall, it's in full bloom right here. I have said before, oh my gosh, the lady before me, she planted all these woody ornamentals, and I have a bajillion of these things around my yard, and I can't believe this, all this stuff. And not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but wow, I have a lot of them, right? This is a midsummer to fall, blooms full sun to partial shade, okay? I will say it will bloom in partial shade, through and through, okay? I have some in different parts of my house. Some are just growing, right out there in the open, and others are more hugging the perimeter of my house. And they still have beautiful blossoms. These are all of my pictures, so this one's probably my favorite, right? I love this deep pinkish color, but they also come in more of a darker light purple. I have ones that are white with the little bit of pop in the middle, and then I also have full white, completely white ones. And I mean, you can't knock these flowers in the sense, look at that bee. Just having his best life, having her best life, it's the females that are doing this thing. I mean, I see all the time, I look out over these, bushes and hedges and things. There are honeybees everywhere, bumblebees everywhere, just chilling in these plants, right? They come out, sometimes they go in there and they just take a nap. They just take a little pollen-induced nap like a little baby who's just fed. They are just living their best lives, okay, in this space. Grows in medium, well-draining soils, can be tolerant of drought, okay? We've had a really dry summer in a lot of regard. This one's gonna tolerate a lot. Mine are thriving with the little amount of rain that we've had and just the back and forth nature of things. This is going to attract lots of bumblebees. I've seen butterflies in this, a little bit of hummingbird activity. It's got that deeper, kind of deeper inside there. Deer resistant, and this is going to be important for my next slide, okay? Deer resistant. I could not help but include this. Literally, I need to start renaming my house like Maison de Rosa Sharon because it is all. What's really nice about these two, some varieties, depending on how they are, they can be pruned to more of a rounded kind of shrub that just is, lots of branches coming up from the ground. Mine are more like trees. So I actually like the way that they grow in a lot of ways. They'll just do whatever you want them to do, and then some, unfortunately. I will say, like I said, be careful about giving it boundaries. All the babies. Okay, I have Rosa Sharon in every possible size you could imagine at my house. Okay, not just like a couple. Like I got like 50 of them. Okay, so just be mindful. If you don't pay attention, one part of the season you're going to go out the next year and go, oh my gosh, why every size you could imagine. But they are worth it. Easy enough to pull up if you need to. Just. I have a little thing that I use to anchor these things out of the ground and things. But anyway, they are beautiful. The next one, deer resistant in mind. You cannot look up pollinators for the shade without getting a hosta thrown in there, okay? However, not all hostas produce good flowers for pollinators, but the plantain lily is it's a non-native. We see this around a lot. Most of these websites that you come across when you're looking at shade gardens and such will have a hosta in there because they grow really well for the most part. But you do want to have one if you're trying to attract pollinators. You need something for them to pollinate, right? So you need to have a flower that they can go to. This particular variety is highly tolerant of full sun to part shade to full shade, blooms mid to late summer, but they do attract deer, right? I can't have any of these in my house. So this, I do apologize, I don't know why my thing was not the way it was supposed to be. This young buck, this is last year's baby, he and dad and mom and auntie and new siblings, okay, they're at my house all the time. This is right outside my window, okay? It's just coming up, and I don't know if you can tell, but over here, those are hostas. They were hostas, right? Not so much as, it was not the plantain variety or anything like that, but they eat these like candy. This is a fresh garden, beautiful salad for them. I mean, you can't, if you don't have some space between, we have a herd and there's just no getting around that, right? We have to cohabitate and just move on and coexist, and it is what it is. But you're not getting away with having hostas unless they are protected if you have deer around your house. So all that is to say. Moving on here, the spotted touch-me-not. This is another native, blooms June to September, longer growing season, bloom season, which is nice. Likes more wet, shady areas. So if you've got some shade that has a more moist soil, this might be for you. Attracts hummingbirds and long-tongued bees, bumblebees, and honeybees, and may also attract butterflies. So it's just an interesting, unique shape. We were talking about shapes earlier, and colors. Offers a nice variety there of both the shape and the color. This is the great blue lobelia. I do have to say, if you have curious pets or kiddos, grandkids, whatever, that like things to put in their mouth and around your yard, do not plant this one. Okay, it does have some toxicity to it. This is a native. It blooms July through October. This is going to like moist, wet soil and requires anything from sun to full shade. All right, so can do a lot. But look at the interesting makeup of this flower. I mean, it's so, seriously, sometimes you just look at these flowers and go, how is it that this grows? Like, this is a plant at our disposal. So cool, love it. The zigzag goldenrod, another little kind of dainty flower, but also it kind of has these spears that grow up, which is really nice, adding a little bit of different type of flowers to your area. This is a native, blooms August through September, likes moist soil and sun, part shade or shade, right? Another deep shade tolerator. Attracts a whole host of pollinators, long and short-tongued bees, wasps, flies, and butterflies. So lots of good stuff going on with this more spear-typed flower here. The stiff gentian, or agweed, native, blooms September through October. This is going to tolerate part shade and sun in moist soils. A lot of times it's found more like a stream bank and roadside, that sort of thing, and it's going to attract long-tongued bees. Culver's rue, also a native, blooms July through October. This is going to like moist soil and can tolerate sun and part shade, very adaptable plant. This is going to attract long and short-tongued bees. Other insects visit for the nectar, but they don't necessarily pollinate it, right? But again, just more kind of spear shape if you're looking for a variety of things within your shade garden that can offer visual as well as the pollinating aspects to things. And then we're moving into late fall. So this is the white baneberry. This is a native. This is actually a threatened species, so one that you might have to work a little harder to come by, but one that is important for keeping our natives alive. This blooms May through June. You might be wondering, well, why are we talking about May through June when we've just put late fall to winter, right? But the berries may last until fall and early winter, which is why I've included them in this space here. So the berries, the flowers are going to attract the pollinators, of course. They only offer pollen and attract more like halistid bees, but then the berries are going to attract birds and again offer more visual things later into the season, which is nice. But all of these parts of the plant are poisonous, again, not good around kids and pets who might get curious for the taste. So just being mindful, if you don't have pets or you don't have kiddos visiting your house, might be one that you just visually enjoy. All right, and this is going to like wooded areas, moist, wet soil, and grows in part shade and shade. That is the end of my extensive list of flowers. All right, so just like us, the bees, the butterflies, and other pollinators need the basic tenets of survival: food, water, and shelter. Maybe after hearing the list of plants I provided, you're thinking, it is midway through summer, I'm trying to enjoy the garden I have at this point, and I'm not really interested in adding a bunch of new plants this year. You can still begin creating a pollinator-friendly shade garden without ever putting a single plant into the ground. So if you are trying to put some in right now, okay, do cluster pollen and nectar heavy plants in the same area or in a straight line. If you already have an extensive area of sun-loving plants, take note of this tip in your current beds that you have. Pollinators get tired, right? Just like we do. So, for example, a bee prefers to travel no more than 1 to 2 miles for their food. They'll travel more if they have to, but they're going to want to stay in that 1 to 2 mile radius. So don't make these pollinators search high and low all over your property for flowers that are hidden in your space, and because they're going to end up getting passed up entirely, right? So if you're able to, plant in a straight line or cluster, pollinator-loving plants together, that's where you're going to get the most action from your pollinators. And even if you don't have, the other one was, do provide clean water sources throughout your garden. Even if you don't have a fairy tale stream running through the back of your garden, maybe some of you do, you can still provide simple water features such as small bowls placed throughout your growing space. Even if you've got a patio or you've got different areas around your deck. I've seen, you don't have to be too fancy about this, right? I've seen quite a few bumblebees hanging out in my kids' water table on my deck, right? Just chilling out, taking a drink, taking a break. It's a shallow water. Just make sure that you continue to clean the water so that it stays nice for them. Do allow some naturally occurring or man-made debris to accumulate on the ground around your beds. This is where shelter comes into place, right? We've talked about food, water, now shelter. I recognize that the previous owners of my home took this part very seriously. I have small stacks of sticks and branches and things like that bundled in different areas of the beds around my house. We have a little under half an acre. And they were very strategic with this. They would make, different leaf piles and sticks and things like that, and you could tell, oh, that was done intentionally. Okay, so that's something very easy that you can do. They need some time to just cool off, take some refreshing time, and have a safe space that does not frequently get disturbed. So here are some of the don'ts. Don't apply insecticides at all, if you can help it, or at least when bees and other beneficial pollinators are not present or when your plants are in bloom. There are several organic options that are not harmful to consider, such as horticultural oils and kaolin clay, but you also want to be mindful of what plants you choose at a nursery that may have already been treated with pesticides, insecticides, or neonicotinoids, which is similarly chemical to nicotine. You don't want to disturb the soil if possible, as if you may destroy nests of ground nesting bees. So there are some of the bees we discussed earlier, like the bumblebee, sweat bee, squash bee, or mining bee. These ones are going to have more ground-based nests. Don't remove all of the ground leaves and stalks of dead flowers in your garden beds, okay, if you can help it. If you can get through the ideology that you've got to remove all the dead, right? I noticed in our suburban area, coming back to this space from Northwest PA, As soon as spring hits or fall hits or things like that, the landscaping companies making their rounds. Holy smokes. I understand that an overabundance of leaves may cause some grass issues or seem unkempt, right? But I do encourage you to consider that those leaves, natural decomposition provides a natural mulching element. It provides nutrients and needed protection for some of your beds. So folks also tend to cut the dead stalks of larger flowers after they become dry and gray and brown. Alliums are one of these that, they grow up and they've kind of got these orbs around them. And I leave mine alone, right? After they've released their little seeds from the heads and stuff, I leave mine alone because they look like a little brown firework around my beds. They just offer something a little bit more visual. But when you cut those back in the late winter, they'll also provide some shelter for different insects. All right, so like I said before, the handout may or may not have the QR code. If you guys are able, and I'll put this back up after I'm completely done, this QR code will take you to that extensive, it'll take you to a website, which will then have linked in there that extensive list of natives that I was talking about. So give me one more second here. I'm going to just wrap up right now, and then I'll put this back on the screen. So I saw this, and I love this little tidbit I found from xerces.org, all right? So one more thing is don't forget you. Right? So enjoy your pollinator refuge. And this is what I want to share with you. This is what I read. So you've got your native plant list dialed in. You've incorporated many features that support overwintering pollinators and other invertebrates. You've fully embraced alternatives to chemical pest and weed management. You are a pollinator gardening champ. But there is one more critter to consider, you. If you're at all like me, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the urgency and spread of social and environmental issues our global community is faced with. Your garden or a friend's garden, your balcony or potted plants, or your neighborhood green space can offer respite from these stresses. Don't forget to carve out time and space for yourself to take some deep breaths, feel your feet on the earth, and observe the insects and other animals sharing that moment with you. They are all incredibly resilient, and we are too. Thank you guys very much.